What are the strict and particular Baptists? In our previous study, we considered the meaning of the label Hyper-Calvinism. I pointed out that Hyper-Calvinism is a caricature of High-Calvinism. Hyper-Calvinism is the name used by Arminians and lower-ranking Calvinists, based on their misunderstanding of higher views of sovereign grace. High Calvinism, on the other hand, is the name used by High Calvinists, which more accurately identifies the teachings of this group of believers. For this study, I'd like to introduce you to a group of High Calvinist churches in England called the Strict and Particular Baptists. Allow me to give a little background. These Baptist churches in England emerged between the years 1610 and 1633. At that time, there were two main issues which divided the churches. First, there was a matter connected with the doctrine of the church, the Lord's table. You see, there were some who regarded the Lord's table as a Christian ordinance, believing it should be administered universally to all Christians, regardless of baptism and church membership. This is sometimes called open communion, and those who subscribed to it may be referred to as open Baptists. There were others who regarded the Lord's table as a church ordinance. They believed it should be administered strictly to Christians who have been baptized and in church membership. This is sometimes called restricted communion, and those who subscribe to it may be referred to as strict Baptists. There was a second matter that concerned this circle of churches at this time. It was connected with the doctrine of salvation, Christ's atonement. There were some who believed the atonement of Christ is universal, provision being made for all sinners. This is called Arminianism, and those who subscribed to it were referred to as General Baptists. On the other hand, there were others who believed the atonement of Christ is restricted to God's elect, and provision was made only for them. This is called Calvinism, and those who subscribed to it were referred to as particular Baptists. Henceforth, some churches during this period of time would be open and particular Baptists, meaning they believed in open communion and Calvinism, whereas other churches would be strict and particular Baptists, meaning they believed in restricted communion and Calvinism. Likewise, there were other churches who would be open and general Baptists, meaning they believed in open communion and Arminianism. And then, of course, there were others that were known as strict and general Baptists, simply meaning that they believed in restricted communion, but subscribed to Arminianism. As you therefore see, there was quite a wide range of views on these matters. Now, the group of churches which are of interest to us for the purpose of this study is the strict and particular Baptist churches, or the restricted communion and Calvinist Baptist churches. Now, just to underscore the meaning of the name, allow me to define each label. By church is meant a local body of baptized believers covenanted to follow the commands of Christ. By Baptist is meant the membership of a church is restricted to those immersed after one's new birth. By strict is meant the Lord's table is restricted to those in membership with a local church. And by particular is meant the atonement of Christ is restricted to those chosen by the Father from eternity. This is what is meant when we refer to the strict and particular Baptist churches. Now, there were among these Calvinistic churches another issue which brought about a division. Some of them subscribed to high views of sovereign grace, otherwise known as High-Calvinism, whereas others were aligned with moderate views of sovereign grace, otherwise known as Moderate-Calvinism. However, these differences were not made a major point of controversy until the latter half of the 18th century, when a Baptist theologian named Andrew Fuller wrote a book in 1786 entitled "The Gospel Worthy of All Acceptation." In this book, Fuller argued against High-Calvinism, asserting that saving faith is the duty of all sinners, and therefore the gospel must be freely offered to them. This articulation of moderate Calvinism was warmly and widely received by the moderate Calvinists of that time. It provided for them the grounds upon which they could justify and defend their moderate views of sovereign grace. In fact, such was the influence of Andrew Fuller that moderate Calvinists were soon called Fullerites. On the other hand, the particular Baptists who nurtured high views of sovereign grace, the High-Calvinists, they stood staunchly against the teachings of Andrew Fuller, believing he was making havoc of the faith. They subscribed to the teachings of an earlier theologian named John Gill. Gill was one of the most well-known Baptist pastors of his day. For 51 years, he served as the pastor of the church which C.H. Spurgeon would oversee around 80 years after Gill's death. Gill authored several significant works on the Bible and theology. In fact, he's considered the first Baptist theologian to publish a comprehensive systematic theology. Early in his pastorate, he actually rewrote his church's statement of faith, which has served for the last 300 years as the basis for the statements of faith for all high Calvinist, strict and particular Baptist churches. You see, Gill maintained high views of sovereign grace. And it happens to be for that reason high Calvinist Baptist churches are sometimes called Gillites. Henceforth, there are two groups among the particular Baptists. There's the moderate Calvinists, whose teachings reflect the theology of Andrew Fuller, and there's the high Calvinists, whose teachings reflect the theology of John Gill. Those Baptists which subscribe to the teachings of Andrew Fuller today are now known as the Reformed Baptists. And make no mistake, my friends, if you meet a Reformed Baptist, he or she is invariably aligned with the teachings of Andrew Fuller and is linked with this historic branch of moderate Calvinist Baptist churches. On the other hand, those Baptists who subscribe to the teachings of John Gill, they continue to be known today as the strict and particular Baptists. They are aligned with high views of sovereign grace and are linked with this historic branch of high Calvinist Baptist churches. And it's no secret that I am a strict and particular high Calvinist Baptist. It's from that point of view that I bring this series of studies on Bible doctrine. And this opens the opportunity for me to now say something in closing that's quite important about this series of studies on Bible doctrine. I want you to know that I do not claim to represent all high Calvinists in their viewpoint, or the way they may articulate certain teachings. Now, as a whole, most high Calvinists share the same conclusions on sovereign grace. But how they arrive at those conclusions sometimes take very different paths. What I am sharing with you in these studies is the path that I take through the Scriptures and the way that I understand the framework of sovereign grace. I do not expect you or anyone else to agree entirely with every point of teaching. However, I do hope you'll always go away with a challenge that will do one of two things. A challenge that will either cause you to affirm your own convictions on certain teachings, or a challenge that will lead you to alter your understanding on those matters. Either way, it's my prayer that you benefit from these teachings. It's my prayer that the Lord will build you up in your most holy faith. And it's on that point I close this study. and I look forward to meeting with you again next time. Until then, may the Lord bless you.